That's disturbing to folks. But again, it's the spirit in which the information is delivered. Like we were talking off air, we're there to try and awaken the public to the issues that are important in this day. And in doing so, we take a lot of responsibility. I mean, what people do as a result of my words, I don't just let go of it. I know, Alex, you don't either. Those words that influence other people's actions make me partially responsible for what others do. And
that was my next point. I talked about that before you were on today. The only thing that freaks me out, and it's not even freaks me out, it's the only area where I get butterflies, is that I genuinely am affecting people, and I can see the growth curve. It's exponential.
Right.
And then I look at myself, and I do beat myself up, and I say, you've got to do a better job. Look at the effect you're having. But then I realize, look, all I'm doing is the best job I can, and I've got a good heart. I'm going in the right direction, and so I just turn it over to God.
Yeah, I'm with you there, absolutely with you there. And I tell you, even those of us that do this work every day, we experience all the same kinds of things that everyone else does. No one's free of anything in terms of tension in their lives. In fact, busy people tend to have very complex lives, and that's kind of the way we thrive, I think. But again, opportunity for change is there. These technologies offer us great opportunities to enhance our possibilities, and that's a lot of the work that I'm taking in this last year and moving forward. I stopped lecturing for a couple of years, and I may get back into a little more of that as time moves on, but mainly to get a focus back on sort of a chance to look at what I've been doing, look at the effect of it, and then saying, what are the most important things that I need to address now?
I was about to say, I haven't, for some reason, years blip by, and I hadn't called you in over a year to have you on, and then I call you, and I don't want to say you sound changed, but I think like everybody, you sound accelerated in the trajectory you were already on, but you sound even more powerful.
I feel like the direction's clear for me, and the opportunity now to really offer encouragement and to try and take the messages that we've been giving on technology and show the other side of that sword and really start to focus more on, okay, these are the things that can be done to us. What can we do ourselves? What can we do to open up the understanding of what's happening and, more importantly, perhaps trigger some of our own latent capabilities?
So going off of defense onto offense.
Absolutely. Let's look for the tools for transformation, the things that allow us to move forward. And I'm not, there's two sides to this. There's a mechanical side of things we can make and build that will help us be healthier, think clearer, do those kinds of things. And then there's a spiritual component that is an individual component that we have to search out in our own ways. And that is not my direction in life to define that for folks. But having said that, anyone that I've ever met that's done anything decent in the world has a deep underlying religious and philosophical underpinnings, and that matters.
Well, that was my next point, that we got to get to calls here or hold you longer if you can do it.
Yeah.
But I promise to get to these. I'm not bashing atheists. I don't dislike atheists.
Right.
And I run into some who are overall good people, but on average not as good. And they can always use aberrant state-driven examples of religion being used as a cover or an envelope for bad. But the people I see facing down real corruption now, I mean, they have an underlying, tie-in to the universe. They understand that justice, the universe bends towards justice. And I see the globalist always pushing an atheistic view, a cynical view, but then when I actually study the New World Order, they are secretly extremely religious, but what would be called the dark side.
Right, I agree with that. And again, the recognition of what we are is fundamental to the change. We're talking about changing the way the world works. We have to change the way we operate as individuals by recognizing first and individually what we are and then begin to act. And as we do, we learn more about what we're capable of, just like a little child. It doesn't end. It continues. That's the whole living experience. And we keep being told, stop thinking, stop contemplating, stop, just fall into the herd. And that is not what humans are intended to be. And this globalist, elitist type of attitude, this paternalistic type of attitude, needs to end. And I think, again, it's been with us a long time. You know, religions tend to be corrupted usually a generation or two after, as people discover the mysteries within the religion, within the philosophy, that actually, you know, science doesn't operate in a vacuum either. You know, God created order, and out of that comes, in one sense, some science. And, you know, it helps us understand the creation, but it isn't the creation in and of itself. And that, I think, is, again, getting back to this basic thing about changing the world requires changing ourselves. And getting rid of fear and worry is the first step in making that change. And then opening up our eyes to the things that we can do and acting on them and seeking. I believe it's important to seek the face of God. Whatever that means to you, I think that is incredibly important. And in the seeking is the finding. And I'm not going to tell people.
Because that opens you up. I mean, now the box is gone. When you start to seek it, then you realize that you can see much further than you thought.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then you also get this recognition you're not alone. And then you start to recognize a little bit about what is possible. As you start to run into what you call coincidences and you realize they're not coincidence at all, you start to do things that all of a sudden the resources appear when you didn't think there were any. Those are, you know, that's miraculous living, and it starts with a changed attitude and a changed outlook. And it is a struggle every single day to change who we are, but it is critically important to recognize that's what life is on this planet. From the time we're born to the time we die, it's an evolution. It's a recognition of our strength.
Exactly. The globalists try to create an artificial system where on the surface there's no struggle, but in that is actually the death, you know, of your individualistic drive. It is through the struggle that we are empowered.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's our best learning environments. And, you know, in the one sense, you know, we're going through a rough time in the economy. We're going through a lot of rough times around the country.
And we see the awakening.
And the awakening happens because that's when we recognize our own strengths, because it's either die or live. We have to make choices. And then we start to recognize the neighbors that we have around us who we never even saw before, who have their hand out and always did. That's where the change starts.
Well, beautifully said. Let's take some calls and do one more short segment because Doc's got to go at 30 after, and I really want to get to these calls, but what a profound interview. And I talked to the Doc. It was his idea, but it's funny. At the same time, I've been thinking about folks to fill in more often when I'm working on films or going out of town, and he just volunteered, hey, I could fill in sometime. So we're getting a great list of folks, the Health Ranger, Dr. Nick Begich, Paul Joseph Watson, Lou Rockwell. Let's go ahead and talk to John in Colorado. John, you're our first caller for Dr. Nick Begich.
Yes, hi. How you doing?
Good. You got a question for him?
Yeah, I do. I'm an electronics technician, and I just love what you guys are talking about today. I've always been interested in physics and quantum physics and stuff like that. But anyway, the question I had was, does HAARP use a particular frequency?
Yeah, it does, and it's in the high frequency range, but it covers, and because you have the technical background, you can manipulate the primary signal and create a secondary effect, which actually gives you the range of 16 decades of frequency, which covers everything from ultra low to visible light.
Is that the modulation?
Yes, this is by modulating it or pulsing the signal to create varying effects, and the coupling with the ionosphere to utilize it for creating effects. But it's essentially a high-frequency transmitter. If you can go to the official HAARP website and get the specific frequency. I don't have it right in front of me, but again, it's the narrow band of high frequency that's used then to create this larger effect.
Going back to that question, I never had time to jam in, and then we'll get another quick one and go to break, come back with other callers. But why are so many of these towers near the poles? I mean, is it easier to manipulate there?
Well, you want to be close to where the magnetic field lines intersect the Earth, which is at the poles, and you also need a high available source of energy. And, of course, in Alaska, we have the oil and gas fields of the North Slope. 25% of all the undiscovered oil in the world is in the Arctic, and so that's important. But the magnetic field line locations is the critical element. The closer they are to the ground, the easier it is to inject energy into them, much more efficient.
Is there any evidence they're actually sucking some type of energy source out of the polar vortex?
Well, that's a question that has not been adequately answered. And there's really a question of whether they can tap energy out of the ionosphere, which is
yeah, because you have those magnetic fields, correct, coming in at that point into the atmosphere and into the pole. We'll be right back with more calls. Great question, John.
crashing through the lies and disinformation. It's Alex Jones, only on the GCN Radio Network.
There's been big developments on that top Bush aide. Looks like mind control. Incredible developments on that front. The guy found dead in the landfill. That's coming up in the next segment. Only got 5 minutes left with Dr. Begich. I've hogged him for myself, but we're going to your calls with quick questions. Who's up next here, John? Mark in Minnesota. Quick question or comment for Dr. Begich.
Yes, doctor. I was wondering your take on, I don't know, I didn't catch the whole show here, so I don't know if you've covered this, but I was wondering about the Gulf oil spill and if some of the toxins could be coming out of the Gulf and coming onshore and developing some kind of a clouds of gas or toxins and killing the birds and animals down there.
That's a good question, Doc.
Great question. I don't have any specific information on that, and I've not seen anything on that. But, you know, we did see a huge release of toxic material there, similar to what we had at the Valdez Exxon spill. But we didn't see those kinds of effects associated with our spill here. So it's hard to say. I think the judge is out on that, but it's certainly a good issue to raise because it did bring in a lot of toxins that weren't in the environment before.
Well, we know when they say all the seafood's safe, the tests have showed it's not. They've been lying about that. Mark, great question. Bill in Florida, you're on the air with Dr. Nick Begich.
Hi, Alex. I got a question. How do I protect myself against a cell phone tower that is 200 yards away?
There's not a lot you can actually do. I mean, short of creating a Faraday cage and shunting the energy away from you, and that's not a practical solution. I can tell you up to 1,500 meters, cell towers have a biological effect. That was documented years ago. I lectured with one of the scientists in Switzerland some years ago on this same subject, and that's the range is 1,500 meters, which is quite a bit further out than you are. The greater effect is with young children or developing children. They tend to be more affected by this. If you remember the old EPA studies of power lines, when they involved children, they showed all kinds of negative effects. So they redid the studies with just adults and showed no effects. That's important. The only real solution is reconsideration of your location if you feel it's affecting your health in a deleterious way.
And we see this across the spectrum with fluoride, many times worse for children. It's radiation, many times worse. I guess it's something to do with the fast, growing, fast dividing cells. Right. We know that radiation in adults targets the gums, the intestines, fast growing cells. With a child, the whole thing's fast growing. That's exactly it. And then for other technologies like cell phones where you're placing them against your head, the skull's thickness is half at age 5 of an adult, and so, or less than half. So you have a lot more energy transiting into the brain. And so there's lots of physical characteristics with children that affect them much differently than adults, particularly when you're considering these new sources of concern. Good question, Bill. Donna in Louisiana, you're on the air worldwide.
Yes, hello, Alex?
Yes.
Okay, nice to talk to you. Thank you for all you do, and thank you, Dr. Begich, as well. I was wondering about empathy genes, pertinent to what you were talking about earlier. They did some studies several years ago, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, I remember, wondering why at the time they were interested in such a thing. But this may play into some of your discussion about mind control and fear and the empathy that we have that they're trying to suppress or something.
We know the Pentagon has been working on turning off empathy to have kind of biological android